up?
Hey, I'll let your ass back up on fire.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another week of Muskies on Tap, bringing to you episode number 98, getting closer and closer to that 100th episode, and we're just been dialing up some game plans for that, so we're really looking forward to that one, and hopefully everyone is as well. That's pretty crazy that we're hitting 100 episodes already. It seems like it's just flown right by, but let's rip right into the podcast here. We're going to have a special guest as our plus one, but we are going to be minus one of one of the Muskies on Tap hosts. But let me introduce the one that is on here tonight, and that is none other than my brother, Max. How you doing, Max?
Doing good. It's April 1st, and I'm looking out the window right now at a full white layer of snow. It's been coming down here since about 1 p.m. So I don't know when this is gonna turn into spring here, Gus, but it's got to be soon. I mean, shit, a month out from Southern Opener in Wisconsin, 2 months out from Northern Opener. We're a couple weeks away from Cave Run. So even though it doesn't feel like it right now, muskie season is quickly approaching. And now that show season is in the rear view for you, we get to actually talk about trips, fishing, like
Yeah.
actual fishing stuff now. We're right there. So yeah, no, we got a great interview for you guys here this evening. So Gus, why don't you fire it up?
Yeah, I'll get that all fired up with Adam Mueller from TopLine Baits. All right, here on the line, we got Adam Mueller from TopLine Baits with us. We are just chopping it up beforehand, trying to get the lowdown on where he's at. So, and we just found that out. But Adam, first off, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, buddy. Gonna put the kids down and I'm ready to chat some muskies.
Awesome. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. You got your TopLine Baits, and you're also kind of nestled in a pretty cool area of Canada that we really don't hear much about. So I'm really excited to get into all that. But maybe first off, what we were just talking about, let us know where you're at, where you're living.
So I am Southern Ontario in a tiny town with one stop sign. It's called Teeterville, Ontario. So I'm basically 25 minutes from the North Shore of Lake Erie. Small town. We actually have a volunteer fire department. But besides that, that's pretty much everything that's going on in our little town.
How'd you end up there? Is that where you're from, or how'd you get to that location?
I'm actually originally from Tillsonburg, Ontario, which is, I would say, about 15 minutes, 20 minutes west of Teeterville. It's a little bit bigger town. Like we're talking, that town has about 16,000 people, where I live now is, I don't know, maybe 1,000 at most. But no, I married the farmer's daughter, and we moved into one of her father's farmhouses, and my brother-in-law lives next door. My other brother-in-law lives next door, and then my mother-in-law is also right around the corner. So that's that's how I got nestled into this little town.
It's
That's
unbelievable,
awesome.
man. And so we're, obviously going to spend a bunch of time tonight talking about your baits, but is that what do you do for like a full-time gig in Teeterville?
Well, I am actually a carpenter. I own my own contracting company. There's
Sweet.
just a small company. There's four of us. I've been doing honestly carpentry work since I was 15, and I went on my own, I think when I was 23. I'm 38 now. So been going a while now, and I'm eventually going to slowly get out of this trade. It got a little crazy through COVID and whatnot. And
Uh,
even at 38 years old, it starts to take a toll on the body and start letting the guys do a bit more. And I'm more so looking for the jobs and quoting. And that's why I'm able to get to this bait thing on the side. Gives me a little more time.
So now that's awesome. So now I've located Teeterville on a map. Does that mean are you a Bills fan, or are you NFL agnostic? Who's your team?
I'll be honest with you. I never got into football. I was hockey through and through. I grew up playing hockey.
So are you a
And
Leafs guy then?
no, I am
Oh,
far from a
okay.
Leafs guy.
Really?
Everybody I know is a Leafs fan. It's the same disappointment every year. I'm actually a Calgary Flames fan.
Nice.
Reason being was Jerome McGinley was always my favorite player,
Hmm.
and I stuck with that team through thick and thin, like most Leaf fans. But I just could never jump on the Leaf bandwagon. It's annoying listening to some of their fans sometimes.
It's funny you say Jerome McGinley. So Gus and I grew up playing hockey. And I still play. I live in Minneapolis now. I'm playing a bunch of men's leagues and stuff around here. And Jerome McGinley was actually the first NHL player I ever saw in the flesh. We were
Oh,
going
Yep.
to a Colorado Avalanche game. This was a long time ago, and they were playing against the Flames. And we went early to this little area where the away team would walk through the hallway. I think when they were either going from, just warm ups to the locker room or whatever, like in their sweatsuits, not actual warm ups. And he came through just looking larger than life, and that was like at the peak of his prowess. So it's pretty cool to see him play. And that was back. I mean, shit, I think on the Avs, it was still like the Forsberg Sakic days.
yeah.
Yep. I
Uh,
remember
it
that.
was just really cool game as like I don't know if it was our first NHL game we ever
It
went
was
to,
for
but
sure mine. Maybe it wasn't
yeah.
yours potentially, but definitely mine. I
Yeah, my
remember
Yes.
that.
first I know the first NHL game I ever went to, we actually went to the Colorado versus the Leafs. And my
Okay.
brother's favorite player was Joe Sakic. So get to watch him. That was when Matt Sundin was still around and Ty Domi. That was back when, it was rough and tough hockey, the good old days.
Yeah, leagues change a lot these days, and it seems that's just kind of the way of the world now. But um,
Yeah, for sure. It's all speed and finesse and skill, and it's cool to watch. It's crazy how fast it's gotten.
yeah, no doubt. I mean, well, I promise we will get into fishing. This is kind of fascinating. So, like, where you grew up, like you said the town you're from was 16,000. You live in a town of 1,000 now, and I'm sure hockey's huge where you're at. So, like, I mean, does everyone play? Like, what is there, I guess, good high school competition down in your neck of the woods? Like, what's the competitive level down there?
Well, pretty much everyone in my high school that I went with, we all played. We did have a high school team, but our high school hockey is nothing like you guys have up there. But we have a lot of junior teams around here, and we have different junior systems. So there was like junior D, which was considered junior development, and there's junior C, and there's junior B, and there's the tier 2A, and then it was the OHL. And so everyone that we played with, or I should say I played with, everyone wanted to strive to go to junior. And like I ended up playing junior D and I won a championship there. And then I played junior C, then I played junior B. I had a bunch of tryouts and, tier two, and then the typical, I blew my knees 6 times and a bunch of injuries. But like that was back when like a lot of junior teams wanted kind of guys like me. Like I was 6'2", like 235, and I was a defenseman. And
I'd hate to go up against that.
like I was actually, believe it or not, I had I was known for power play and penalty kill stuff. And, you know, being as big as I was, it kind of got forced upon you that you're going to have to start chucking them at some point, especially as you got higher up in the ranks. And then after that, I went and played some like college around Canada. And then I got into some senior hockey, and that was just an absolute gong show, senior A hockey. I was playing
I
against a
bet.
bunch of ex NHLers, some guys that used to play in that Quebec Fight League, and there was just, it was wild then. And I actually played senior when I was 22, so I was considered pretty young, and we were playing against guys that were, like I said, ex NHLers that were 40 years old. We ended up playing against this guy who was this native dude who was like 6'8". His name was Bear Claw, and he just tried to murder everybody that touched
Oh
the
my
puck.
God.
So there's some funny stories in there, but I eventually, being self-employed when I was playing senior, I ended up getting leveled from behind and just tore everything in my neck. So I couldn't work for a few months. And that's when I decided, you know what, I'm not playing this anymore, and just went to beer leagues. And even now I skate every once in a while, but it's fishing for me now. I'm making baits in the winter.
Dude, that's incredible. I could not imagine playing junior hockey in Canada, like especially, I mean, no offense at all, but some of those like lower tier leagues, like they I'm sure are still just competitive as hell. And then you also get like you were saying, you were probably very useful in a league like that. And I mean, I've heard stories, I've never seen it in action, but like fighting back
I
then and physicality was just probably insane.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. I think it was senior year, Max. I don't know if you remember, we for high school we traveled up to northern Minnesota, in the Iron Range. What was that town again? Like the famous
War
place?
Road?
War Road? Yeah, I think it was there. And we played some northern Minnesota and I want to say one or two Northwest Ontario teams, for sure one. And I remember specifically that they were just it's like the entire team was a carbon copy of like every player was the same. They were all just rough and tough. Like that's all they wanted
Units.
to do is just beat the shit out of you. And I think we were able to win and out of just finesse and speed. Like you say, that's how the game
Yeah.
is now. But I just remember
What?
that them being brutal. I mean, they were
Well,
they would finish their checks every corner. You just hate to go down in there. I was a defenseman, a little 5'9", 150 kid bearing in the corner. I probably got somebody, yeah, like 6 foot, 200 right
well,
behind me.
I got a kind of a funny story with my first senior game.
Yeah.
We were going to Petrolia, where this is where this Bear Claw guy played, and then they had two ex NHLers on their team that just they had like 350 penalty minutes and like 13 different pro leagues, and
Oh my God.
we were actually winning. I believe it was like 9-0 at the time. There's like 5 minutes left in the third, and one of their players scored a goal, and they kept the puck. And our coach started chirping this guy. So the guy threw the puck at our coach, and our coach was like a D1 baseball player, grabbed it and threw it and hit him in the back of the head. And then there was just a full out bench clearing brawl. And
Oh my God.
those two big mutants just come flying over and Superman into our bench. And luckily, we actually had a guy on our team who won 2 Mem Cups with Barry Colts and played with Ryan Ellis, and he was their fighter. And that Bear Claw
Nice.
guy jumped right into the bench, right to this guy. And he seen it coming, and you just see him shaking the elbow pads off, and he just grabbed him by the head, and he just threw 50 or 60 uppercuts to this guy. There were sticks flying. Their trainers came across the ice. It was just an absolute melee. And then, of course, the people and the fans, and they eventually just called the game, and we had to be escorted out of there.
That's
I was gonna
unreal,
say, who do you
man.
take to the bench? Everybody?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like I said, these two guys that came over, right? The one was 6'8", and the other guy was like 6'3", 260, and they were the first ones in our bench. But
Yeah. No thanks.
strength in numbers when you're coming into our bench.
God, that's
Oh
good
my
stuff. Yeah,
goodness.
I'm sure you could probably tell stories for days about that stretch of your life. But yeah, let's get into some muskie fishing. So, obviously talking about the area that you're at, what's life like for you right now as far as where you're fishing at, how you're spending your time outside of making these baits and carpentry.
Well, I do a lot of fishing in the Great Lakes. Um, there's a few around me. I drive a lot, but I'm kind of at the point now where I'm just chasing the one.
Hmm.
And obviously the Great Lakes are a good place to find them. And I would say the last ten seasons we've been putting some work into a stretch of area that just for the longest time there was never anyone there. I didn't even know if people thought there was muskies there. Um, but the very first time we went out, we're just like, we're gonna try it. We end up having a 4 fish day, and we're like, oh, this will be easy. And then we went on a 2 month stretch where we didn't even get a sniff. So
Oh,
we're like, okay. So then it was like, at that point, it kind of drew me in. I was like, we know they're here, but it's such a big area. I mean, you could fall asleep at the wheel and wake up 3 hours later and you're still in the middle of nowhere. It's just a giant, giant, giant sand flat. Um, and we just put a lot of time in, a lot of auto charting, marking random stuff. Like every once in a while, you'll come across a boulder or a rock, and that thing will hold fish. And so we just kind of over the 10 seasons, we've just been picking away at certain areas and moving around because I think most people would agree that a lot of these Great Lakes fish on these open areas are a lot of roaming fish. And so you definitely got to, we do mostly trolling because you just got to cover water at this point. We're at least we're allowed 2 rods a person. So at least we're doing that because there's a lot of lakes in Canada where you're only allowed to run 1 rod. And so we do a lot of trolling around, especially in the summer. We'll troll pretty quick, 4.5, 5 miles an hour and just try and cover as much water as we can. And things get a little easier in the fall, I would say, just because there's areas that we know that if you find one, there's generally, the wolf pack that you hear guys talk about on St. Clair and stuff like that. And, a couple falls ago, we ended up ending the season on December 13th with a 9 fish day.
Wow.
And our first fish we caught was a 50 and 3/4 by 24.5. And then the next one was a 48 by 25. And then our smallest fish was a 45 that day. We had like 4 over 48, and they're just absolute blimps. I sent Gus a few pictures of some of the fish we caught, and they're just absolute tanks. But that was one of those days that everyone dreams about.
Yeah.
It's just like, it seemed like if we came across one, they ate. And we run active target. So I like to watch the lures, and we ended up catching 2 fish that were following. We get the rods out of the rod holders, rip it forward a couple of times, and we watch them come up and smack it, and you set the hook on them. One being that big 50-incher. So
Wow.
that was a cool experience.
Yeah, we've experienced that as well with the live, looking back at trolling lures, but we don't troll as much as you guys do out there, and we've found some success in that, or at least getting them to show a lot more interest. But more on that Great Lakes fishing, I mean, what we got over here is obviously the famous Green Bay, and how much it's pretty heavily stocked. It's got a lot of tributaries, but the thing that people don't talk about is going outside of the bay, and fish 100% do roam around. That's kind of what you're doing. Is Erie, or I guess anywhere over there, kind of is this just a fishery of natural fish, or do you get replenished over there?
This is all 100% natural. We have like next to no stocking. I know there's been some talks about stocking certain areas around us now that would run into the Great Lakes, some rivers and tributaries. Whether that goes through, I'm not sure, but we're pretty much the Great Lakes, even going to northern Canada, everything is just 100% natural reproduction. So we don't get any stocking. And
Wow.
that's why
Oh, go ahead.
our season, right? Our season goes from the second week of June till December 15th. So we have a fairly short season, but that's the reason why.
Gotcha. Yeah. Do they who knows, maybe on the Wisconsin, or not Wisconsin, sorry, United States side or your side, do they tag any fish? Have you seen, because I've seen random things pop up on Facebook that show Erie walleyes and how much they move around and smallmouth and whatnot, but I haven't seen anything about muskies there.
There has been some telemetry studies. I was actually part of one last year. We tagged, I think it was 16 fish total. But there was actually John Bondi, one of the first years I was at the Muskie Odyssey. He was beside me, and we got talking. And he was part of a telemetry study. This might have been years ago, but he told me there was a fish that was tagged from the Detroit River, and they found that fish to basically do a whole loop of Lake Erie, went all the way up to the Upper Niagara, came all the way up our side, and it was back into the Detroit River come January
In one
That's a
year.
lot of miles.
in one year. Yeah.
That's got to be hundreds of miles.
Well,
Hopefully
I think,
nobody
yeah,
was looking for that fish. They moved it one day.
yeah. Well, I think Lake Erie's like 4.6 million acres or 5.6 million acres to give you a rough idea. So that fish traveled a lot.
That's unreal. Well, all right. So yeah, I mean it's a whole nother world than we're used to. Like I was curious hearing about stuff like that, but um let's get into the baits because that's kind of why we brought you on, right? So uh give us the full rundown. Talk to us like we've never seen these things before. What you've been building, how long you've been doing it, and kind of what you have cooking up for this year.
Yeah, I started tinkering with baits is like towards the end of 2018 into 2019. Being a carpenter, right? I already had all the tools to do it. I'm a very hands-on guy. And I get obsessed with things. Like as soon as I caught my first muskie, I barely fish for anything else now. And so I dove right in. I made a couple baits, I was watching YouTube, made a couple crankbaits, some dive and rise. And then, of course, I was like, I got to figure out how to paint these because at that time I was just using rattle spray cans. And then I started watching YouTube videos on airbrushes. And then one thing led to another. I got some baits to just some buddies that I would fish with, and we started catching fish on them right away. And then the whole COVID thing hit, and then you see the price of all these custom baits going on. And my buddy's like, "Why don't you just try and sell some?" And I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll try it out." Jumped on a bunch of muskie forums. The first bait I actually sold, there were one knocker creepers. Was the first bait I sold, and those went over pretty well. Started selling a bunch of those, and then we throw a lot of tubes where we fish when we go to Northern Ontario. And it was like one of those. I got one out of the package. It was brand new, cast it in, it just ripped through, right? It was probably just a defective tube. And I was like, I bet you I can make a hard body tube. And so me getting back from a 5-day fishing trip, went right to the shop and I started messing around. And I came up with a ripper, is what it was called. And so basically it's a hard body tube with tinsel out the back. And it was like basically if you guys ever throw the glide rig on tubes or not, I would say it was kind of a combination of a glide rig with like a mid-depth rig. Being it was made out of wood, you still had that buoyancy, but it had enough weight to make it sink, but it was easy to pop it side to side and it had this good gliding, slow drop motion. And I think it was like the second or third fish on it was a 53 and a half. So we kind of knew we had something. And then I ended up going up to Lake of the Woods to fish the Muskie Cup, and I think this was 2020 or I think it was 2020. And that's where I met Glenn McDonald, right, from 54 Bust. He was fishing in the tournament. And I just watched a video with Glenn at that time, just before the tournament. He was fishing with Brian Scaife. And it just so happened after day one, we're all in his cabin having some beers, and I just started talking to him. And I was like, hey, I make baits. And I'm sure he's heard that from, at that point, a million people. Showed him some videos, and I'm like, here, I got this hard body tube, and he seemed pretty intrigued about it. So we met up with him after. I said, I'll give you one of these baits after the tournament. I'm not going to give it to you before. And we ended up, I gave him one, and I think it wasn't even a week later, he sent me a clip. He caught a nice, really fat fish on Eagle Lake, and he's like, you might be onto something here. And then he caught a really big fish in the fall, and he made a couple videos. And that kind of blew things up for me. And then going into the next season, again, me being a tinker, like I'm known for like, I bet you I have 300 random baits that I've made for myself with just different lips, different types of dive and rises, some with like buzz bait prop. Like you guys will be able to see this, but no one else will be, but it's like a buzz bait tail. The thing runs wicked. It's super loud. It moves a ton of water. So I was always tinkering with stuff. And this is when I came up with the dipstick. And I actually came up with a dipstick because one of the guys I fish with, one of my main fishing partners is my uncle. He's one of those guys that he just loves fishing. He has a nice boat. He'll go, if I tell him there's a great moon phase after work, he'll leave work early just to meet me at the lake. He'll go anywhere. If you want to do a 7-day trip and fish for 15 hours a day, like he's game. But he's also the same guy that if there's one snag in the lake, that he's going to get that snag 3 times in one trip. So I'm like, I came up with a dipstick and I got it the way I run. And I basically told him like, here, you can use this bait because even a dipstick like you could use it. And that name kind of stuck. So it's kind of organic how that one came across.
Seriously.
And again, I ended up sending
I love
it
that name.
Yeah, it worked out pretty good. And so I ended up sending one of those to Glenn. And he even told me, he's like, oh, it just seems like another dive and rise. I'm like, it does a little bit more. It's like a twitch bait, dive and rise hybrid. He's like, just try it. He asked for a certain paint job. So I gave him this yellow belly trout paint job. And then he ended up, I think he got 28 fish. There's something along those lines on that next season. And he made, I don't know, probably 10 different videos with that bait included. And that things really just took off after that. So he really blew up that bait. And then, of course, I had to make 3 different sizes. Made the dipstick mini, and then I made the XL, which I'm sure if you guys know Matt Vavrock, I end up giving him one of the XLs, and he does pretty good up in your neck of the woods fishing that XL. And that's the one that's right. Gus has got that one. And that's what I like to throw a lot. But we also, where we are in Canada, like big baits is definitely a thing. And they just move so much better than any other bait, which is naturally going to happen with a longer style bait. It just has more glide to it. And it just really took off from there. And I'm always just tinkering off with different baits. And I guess there's 2 new baits that I had for this season at the shows. And that was the Nomad Shad, which I know in the Wisconsin show, a lot of the Green Bay boys really liked it. I don't know, Max, if you've seen that, but it's a little 5-inch.
Oh, wow.
Little 5-inch, super fast, quick wiggle. And so I came up with a straight, and this is just the jointed version. And
Damn.
basically, I made that last year, and with 8 minutes of runtime, we caught 2 fish on it. And so I was like, oh, we might be onto something. Then I sent a few up in Wisconsin, and they got some fish right away. So I was like, I'll start making these. And I feel like there is a trend in muskie fishing right now where guys are, even in our neck of the woods, are starting to downsize. And like I know we even when we started on the Great Lakes, a lot of guys told us, shad wraps. Shad wraps were the first bait we used to catch fish on the Great Lakes. And then you hear the Green Bay guys always using small baits and catching the fish on them. So in our minds, we thought you couldn't run anything bigger than a shad wrap until we started running baits bigger than a shad wrap. And lo and behold, fish will eat them.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely something that I think it's a lot of play up in our neck of the woods, northern Wisconsin, is the small bait trend. And yeah, certainly, I don't know, I'm sure Gus could speak to this even more than I can, but we've definitely tried to buck that trend in our neck of the woods. And I also think like fishing over here in Minnesota a little bit more, you kind of get a lot more comfortable throwing the bigger stuff. And once you just kind of get, I think you get comfortable throwing the bigger stuff, like you kind of almost get addicted to it a little bit in a way. But
I
yeah,
agree.
no, I'm pumped to use that dipstick more this upcoming year. I'm really looking forward to it. I already have a few places in mind. I'm pretty excited to throw it at. So
Yeah, I actually, even last year on opener, we were up in the Nipissing area, and it was just one of those like. And plus, when our season starts in June, depending on the spring, sometimes the fish are already in like their summer spots. And last year was like one of those things where it just got so warm so fast. And it was just one of those days where I ended up throwing the mini dipstick, and I put 3 fish in the boat just on the mini. And that was the first time I've thrown the mini in a long time. I generally throw the mini dipstick when I go pike fishing because I still do like pike fishing. Being on Lake Erie, the pike fishery on Lake Erie is absolutely insane. You can have a 50, 60 fish afternoon. And yeah, so you also have a shot if you go to certain areas at 40 plus inches and they're built like tanks.
pretty
And
sweet.
so yeah, like downsizing, that was probably the first time I've thrown a mini dipstick, even on an opener for me. So
That's awesome. Do you I know you're talking about big baits and stuff. Is that kind of the forage out there by you? I mean, I know Nipissing and whatnot is going to be different, but just Erie, for example.
yeah, we're talking a lot of perch. We haven't had ice. This is the first winter we've had ice in I think 3 years. So like I would say the perch stock was like absolutely insane last season. We would run our active target, and this one night we went out. There was a big bug hatch, and the active target was lit up. We did a 2 kilometer straight run, and basically from 20 feet to 5 feet under the surface was just absolutely full of perch and different. There's obviously walleye mixed in, there's smallmouth mixed in, there's sheephead and carp and all that other stuff, but it was just absolutely insane. Then we did this big 200-yard loop and then came back the other way, and it was the exact same thing. It was like, there's not a chance we're ever going to catch a fish with all this bait here. And luckily this winter we had ice. So the ice fishermen got to go out. All the meat hunters got to fill their freezers because by
Oh boy.
because by us there's a it's called like the inner bay there, and it's just there could be 1,000 guys out there on a weekend, and there's a lot of people that keep those like 6 inchers up to 13, 14 inchers, and which I think might actually help coming this season. But there's also a lot of shad. There's a lot of suckers. Pretty much everything you think of in the Great Lakes. We don't have any Cisco's. There is some lake herring, I believe, or alewife, I should say. But
Smelt it all?
there's actually some smelt that are returning. It used to be a big smelt thing by us, but they kind of got outfished for a while. But now you hear a lot more guys catching them, even ice fishing.
Gotcha. Because that was one thing I found out when our neck of the woods, we got a bunch of ice on Superior as well. I went up to Chequamegon Bay once, and that was the deal. I've never been there at all, and all those guys talked about it's like we got to find the smelt, the smelt, the smelt. Like that's how we're gonna find pike, walleye, trout, Lakers, everything. Like that's what you look for out there. But and I assume actually we did actually catch some perch as well. But I kind of figured you did have kind of like all the bait sizes and whatnot. But I could see how like a nomad shad would really crush for you guys too as well, just as much as over here.
Well, actually, that one big fish that we caught a couple years ago, it was like that was a 48 by 25. When I picked it out of the net, it spit up about six different shad, and they're all in that 5 to 6 inch range. So that was also another like, huh,
Interesting.
maybe they're because we did find some bait, and it to me on like the live scope and stuff, it didn't look like perch because just because of the size. And some of the perch schools that we do see, like they could be 100 yards plus long, and you can just tell by the size of them. And I mean, Great Lakes perch, right? You can catch 14, 15 inch perch. Some of them are pushing
Yeah.
like a pound and a half to 2 pounds. And just the way I was judging, I didn't think it was shad, but I was like, I don't know what this is. And then that kind of clarified it for us when we looked in the net after, and there were six dead floating shad.
Jesus. I know. So this actually just popped in my mind, and it's kind of like a random thought. Let's see what you kind of think, Max or Adam, or um. So maybe these fish are going after kind of like the smaller ones. You know how Green Bay and all the Great Lakes have all these giant uh bait fish, but they also have, the small shad, the small perch, and you're saying that's what those big fish are coughing up. But wouldn't a small perch or a small shad swim slower than a larger one? Because when those fish get larger, wouldn't they get faster? Because muskies are lazy, so they want to go after the slow and easy meal. So maybe the slow and easy meal is the smaller, and maybe the smaller ones group up more so they can find the schools easier rather than targeting a lone wolf 14-inch perch or 14-inch shad or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Not, I'm not sure on perch speed per inch.
Is that a thing? Maybe.
Is that
Random thoughts.
I think your second point might be probably more, at least in my brain, that's what's working for me. The smaller ones just probably tighten up, and the muskie can come in just
Oh
mouth
yeah.
wide open, and you
I
know,
I personally think I think a lot of times when you get in those perch schools, those bigger perch are generally in the center of the schools, and then the smaller ones tend to be on the outside. And I would assume maybe it's the same with the shad, but the thing with when you're fishing these sand flats, right? There's nothing for these muskies to hide. Like we see them on side imaging all the time. So there's really no ambush point for these fish. So they sit on the bottom. And in all honesty, we run our baits pretty high up in the water column. So they'll shoot from 20 feet and hammer a bait that's 3 to 5 feet under the surface. So I almost wonder if those bigger fish are in the school, like in the tighter part of the school, and then the smaller fish on the outside. And if that school like kind of swims over them, they probably just shoot up and aim for the side. Or I'm not 100% sure what the fact is on all this,
Hmm.
but it's all speculation. But it seems like it could be a thing.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, sorry, that was just a random thought. I was curious on what you thought there, but in that sense on trolling out there, do you try and specifically run like a specific setup off of one side, like try and get a school going, or do you want to spread out as much as you can to cover water, if that makes sense?
In all honesty, on my uncle gets his side of the boat, I get my side of the boat. I have the active target on my side. I tend to keep them fairly tight. I put the bigger bait close. The bigger bait is usually down deeper, but it's close to the boat. Like I made a bait, it's called the GC8. This is actually the bait that got those two real giant fish, but it
That's
gets
good.
down real quick. So I can watch that, and it's only 30 feet of line is getting me to that 18-foot range. And I put it in the down rod, and then I run my board rod, and it'll probably only be 10 feet behind that bait, but a lot higher up in the water column. This is more so for fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like sometimes in the summer, we'll run big baits like 10 feet off the down rod. And like I talked to Kevin Goldberg. I don't know if you guys know who Kevin Goldberg is, but he's
Yeah.
an absolute stick everywhere he goes. And he talked to me about how that first bait through is like the bait that gets their attention. And he's even told this story. I don't know if it was on Muskie Insider or what, but how he had this believer that was the obnoxious, noisy bait closest to the boat and that gets their attention. And then there's a bait 15, 20 feet behind it that they're more apt to go after. So that's
Interesting.
kind of what we would do. I'd put out a big bait close to the boat, not necessarily in the prop wash, but say, 15 feet of line. I run 4-foot leaders. So that bait's there. And then with the board, I would have it maybe 15 feet behind it and 3 feet higher. And I also do that for my own personal, because I want to watch it on active target. So it's easy to keep both baits on the screen, obviously until you're turning and whatnot, but you can watch those baits. And it's amazing how many times a fish will shoot off the bottom, and as fast as it comes up, it just drops right back down.
Yeah.
So
Gus, if you don't have any more trolling questions, I had to ask about these tournaments because you kind of, I don't know if it was before we started recording or not, or when we were, but you said that obviously you did the tournament over in Lake of the Woods, and then you do some events way over in New York too. So how many tournaments do you do a year, and how long have you been fishing tournaments for?
let's see, last year there might have been 5 or 6 in total. The first time I fished a tournament in New York was the following season, and we fished the Big Baller tournament. We ended up winning it our first time on Lake Chautauqua,
Nice.
and so that was
Hell
cool.
yeah.
And I ended up catching the first fish in the first 10 minutes on a proto crankbait. I tell the guys like just put me in the back of the boat because again I just bring a lot of random stuff. And those
Yeah,
guys in the front of the boat will put their confidence baits on and go to town. And I cycle through some random stuff, see if it works. And just so happened I caught a fish in the first 10 minutes, and then later in the day we got another one, and we were the only team to put 2 fish in the boat that day. So that was my first experience on Lake Chautauqua. But
is
then
that
we
a
went this,
one day event?
yeah, that's a 1 day event. It's it's late October. It's a
Oh
casting
wow,
tournament,
cool.
and yeah, then we went back last year and we didn't catch a single thing. So that's tournament fishing, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
no doubt. What did you think about Chautauqua? I've, obviously seen some videos of people fishing it and know that the PMTT, I think, used to go out that way every once in a blue moon. Seems like a really cool body of water.
It is. It's a big body of water. It's it lays out pretty cool. There's a lot of good weed beds. There's some deep stuff. There's a couple big basins that you can fish. There's like, towards the south end, it's really clear and shallow. You go to the north end, it's a little bit dirtier, or I might have had those switched up, but there's a lot of weed beds. A lot of guys fish weeds, which in all honesty, I like. From where we fish in Northern Ontario, we normally fish rocks, so I would say weeds is definitely not my strong point. But that's also another reason why I like tournament fishing and fishing with all these random people that I meet and different guides that I get baits to. Is I like to fish with these guys and just I pick people's brains. I just like learning as much as I can, and then maybe take a tactic and bring it back to where I am, or I talk about what we do and maybe they even take some advice and try it out where they are.
For
And
sure.
the amount of times I've gone to a lake, especially in those areas, and someone's like, they only eat 5 to 6 inch baits. Well, we've caught them on much bigger baits, and I'm going to try it out. Why not?
Classic.
I'll go to the back of the boat. Put me in the back of the boat, and I'll try it. And sure enough, we catch fish doing it.
Yeah. That's always music to your ears when somebody says they only eat X
Yeah.
here.
Then you know what they're throwing, so you know what not
Yeah.
to throw.
Yeah.
It's,
All
it's
right.
pretty
Or
much how it
Muskies have
goes.
seen that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or specific colors. There's certain colors.
Right.
Oh, they won't eat
yeah.
a black bait, or they won't eat a pink or white bait. It's like, well, hold
Yeah.
my beer. Let's try it out.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing how much times that ends up working out pretty well when you do that.
Well, I'm kind of like one of those guys that it's like, if they've never seen this, like there's so many musky fishermen now, right? We all know that there's a lot of pressure, a lot of places you go now. It's like, why not try something different? A lot of
Mhm.
lakes you go to, everyone throws blades, which is very common. It's like, well, I'm going to try to throw something a little different. Maybe I'll throw in a grenade. Maybe I'll throw in a ripper with a blade attachment, or even just throw the dipstick, or throw one of these prop style diving rises that I've made just to see. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it is what it is.
It's all trial and error. I mean, it's good to have that done in the pre-fishing, but during the tournament, it's a little tough if you're trying to get something first time on a brand new bait. But um, so you're saying that let me see what I was gonna ask. I was actually gonna ask about one more thing, trolling, before we got back into tournaments. So do you run boards then? I don't think you mentioned that at all. Would you do a short board to a down rod that you would see?
So normally I'll run one down rod, and then we do put them out on boards.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, that's most of the time is just to control the depth and get it away from the boat sometimes, because sometimes the waters that we fish can be 30 feet of visibility. Like it's
Hmm.
just absolutely insane. You look down, you're in 30 feet of water, and it looks like you're in 8 feet of water. So there are times where you do want to get things away from the boat, but then at the same time, I had a fish last year. I was bringing in a 10-inch bait in the middle of summer, reeling it in. I just took the weeds off it because it bottomed out. And as I was letting it out, it was about 10 feet behind the boat. I watched the fish on live, like after target, shoot off the bottom in like 20 feet of water and started following it, where we all looked over and we can watch it right behind the bait. And it followed that bait for like 35 seconds. And we were even turning, trying to get that fish to go. I was ripping it forward, and it even screamed past a smaller bait to get to that bigger bait.
Wow.
But yes, generally we do run boards. There are times we don't. Sometimes we have like a rod in the prop wash, and then just another rod with the shallow running bait where we can let it out a lot further, just to prevent tangles. Again, I fish with a guy a lot that is prone to accidents and putting hooks in his arms and tangling things. So I try to be mindful of that, and I tell him he's 58 years old, and I'm always the dad on the fishing trip. But
Oh my
Yeah, we
goodness.
know somebody like that we fish with a bunch who's not on the podcast tonight.
yeah,
Um, all right, so diving back into the tournament. So you mentioned that you went over and did one at Lake of the Woods. I gotta imagine that's probably a pretty good clip for you to drive all that way. Was that your first time fishing it, or have you been there before?
that was the very first time I was there. I fished it
Wow.
another time since. I actually flew, but I have a
Okay.
buddy who fishes the tournament. He drags his boat, and that's a 22-hour drive,
Wow.
dragging the boat. And then the next time, so he drags the boat, so I just give him all my gear and I fly there.
He's
So
got to be a
he's
little jealous of that.
oh yeah, but he wants to take his boat. He's got a nice fast boat. It's definitely the fastest boat in the tournament. So he gets all my gear, and then we usually stay for a week. So we do a lot of, we fish around. There's so many different areas on Lake of the Woods. We don't fish where the tournament is, but there's like all these areas that set up the same, so we can go and fish
Cool.
elsewhere, like the north end of the lake, or the west end of the lake, or the south end of the lake, and get a rough idea like what the fish are doing. And then I again, just being buddies with like Glenn and a couple other guides up there. I got to fish Eagle Lake and go and meet up with some of these guys while I'm up there. Took my wife up there the last time. So we get up there for at least a week, and that tournament's wicked, man. It's if you guys ever wanted to have a cool tournament, I would suggest you guys go to that one because it's basically when the first time I went there, it was like everyone fishing the tournament was a guide on Lake of the Woods. And like I was the only Joe Schmo from Southern Ontario that has never fished Lake of the Woods. We ended up tying, I think it was 11th out of 25. So I was pretty happy about that. Our
Nice.
goal is not to finish dead last. So I was pretty happy. But it's such a wicked body of water.
What time of year is that tournament?
That is usually September 22nd. And the reason I know that it's always my wife's birthday. And she was kind enough to let me go the one year. And then I brought her the other year.
Nice.
What'd you
Cool.
think of Lake of the Woods compared to Eagle? Do you have a favorite or kind of what? Yeah, like
I
first thoughts, because those are two completely different bodies of water from what it sounds like.
They are 100% different. And Lake of the Woods is cool because it's like four different lakes in one. If you go to a certain part, it's super gin clear, super deep, lake trout water. You go to
Mhm.
where we fish the tournament, it's a lot shallower basins. You know, the rocks lay out different. You get to certain areas where the rocks are steep break walls and jagged rocks. Then you go to another part where it's smooth. And there's some areas that have more weeds than other. But I honestly, I've only fished Eagle Lake twice. Um, but I find Eagle Lake very intriguing. And I know if I was up there more, I'd probably lean towards Eagle Lake. And I think the potential for a giant is more so in Eagle Lake. Not that there's not big fish in Lake of the Woods. I had a guy on opener catch a 54 up there on one of the new baits. And that's obviously an absolute whale on Lake of the Woods. But even the lodge that I stayed at, they had one on the wall. It was like, I think it was like 56 and a half or 57 by 28 was the biggest fish they had come from their lodge. So, and then they had like a tiger that was 52 by 26 or 27, something like that.
Oh my God. Basically
So,
a world record
like,
almost.
it was absolutely, and you know what? And I actually lost the biggest fish of my life on Eagle Lake when I was up there with my wife.
Oh no.
So it was me and
Uh-oh,
my
how'd
wife
that go?
is well with my wife being not a musky fisherwoman by any means. She doesn't fish that often. I was like, we're gonna mix in a lot of walleye stuff to keep you occupied, and it's just fun because the walleye fishing up there is just absolutely insane. You stop at a spot if they're there, you could catch them until your arms fall off.
Yeah.
So we were on this walleye spot. He had the live scope going, and sure enough, we seen this mark come in, came right under the boat. He even threw the grid up to see how big it was because it was literally right under the transducer, like 15 feet below him. And we're just like, oh my God. I'm like, this is huge. I grabbed the tube, I dropped it down. It was probably 6 feet under the surface. That fish just nosed up and shot up like a rocket. It hit my line, and I like took my rod all the way to the gunnel. And I just absolutely hammered this fish and just started fighting. The girls were watching it on live scope. He's getting the net. It came to the surface. It was just like, oh my. And then the tube came flying right out of its mouth.
Oh.
I
Oh my
honestly,
God.
I, I honestly don't even think I ended up getting hooks in this fish. I think she just
There's
clamped down so hard.
Yeah.
And because the only reason I say that is we watched that fish go straight back down, right to the bottom below the boat. And I dropped the tube back, and she came and looked at it. She would follow it up to like 6 feet under the surface. Then I started like throwing like I even put on a bass jig at one point. I was throwing anything and everything to see if I can get this fish to go. And we ended up coming back with live suckers. We were running two suckers. Within 5 minutes, we seen this fish come back because we came back when it was getting like an hour before dark, right? You legally can't fish in dark on Eagle Lake. And we found her because like it's like a sand basin. There's just this big boulder, and you would just watch all the walleye disperse. And here comes this giant mark again, and she was chasing the sucker around. And when she was doing that, the other sucker rod ended up dumping. And the guy looks at me. He's like, "You gonna get that?" I was like, "No, man. Like that fish is right there. That's the one I want." It ended up being a pike. He unhooked it as he's
That's
dropping it down.
hilarious.
Like he was dropping that sucker back down because it didn't really do anything to the sucker, and he's watching the live scope. All of a sudden, another fish grabbed the sucker when he's dropping it back down, sets the hook on it. I'm not even paying attention because I'm watching this fish just chase the sucker around. He's like, "Are you gonna get the net?" And I was like, "What do you got?" He's just like a low 40s fish. It's like, "Oh shit, it's a muskie." I go to get the net and it pops off. We're like, "Oh, sorry, dude." He's like, "Oh, whatever." And we watched the live scope and we seen that 42 incher or whatever it was go under the boat right close to this big fish, and like the difference in markings was just amazing. And that big fish turned right around and chased that fish off so fast.
Really?
We tried to turn the live scope to
Really?
watch it, and oh, it was amazing. It was gone like within a snap of the finger. That fish took off, and they both just ripped out a screen. But
Interesting.
for the next 2 days, we went back to that spot on moon phases, early morning, and we've seen that fish every day, and could never get her to go. And we ended up going back that one night, talking to a guide, and he knew the spot we were fishing. And it was about 3 or 2 months or so prior to that. I think it was closer to opener because I was up there in September. And he's like, "Oh yeah, one of his clients got like a 54 by 54 and 3/4 by something on that spot." And then the guy I was with just kind of looked at me and he's like, "This one might have been the same size, if not bigger." It's like, so it was
So
a heartbreaker.
I feel I feel like a lot of people we talk to about Eagle Lake have like at least one horror story up there of like big fish, losing a big fish. But it's interesting, you talk about that and like how you went back and you saw the fish every day. But like you literally your only opportunity for what it sounded like was just that first encounter when it came in, just unassuming, and you dropped the tube down, and then after that it was days on end. That fish like smartened up or
Yeah.
something. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to think about on why
Well,
that dropping the tube down that one time was the only reason. She goes then and then just never goes again. It's kind of crazy.
Well, the funny thing was when that fish originally came in, it started nosing down on one of the jig and minnows, and it was just staring at it. By the time I got the rod, I seen it like its tail was almost vertical at the point. And as soon as I dropped that lure, it had a little blade on it, and like I said, it was maybe 6 feet under the surface. You just wash your nose up, and just with one kick of the tail, just it slacklined me so much that I was able to like drop my rod to the gunnel, and then it started tightening up. And I was using, a 9 foot Moab, and I put the screws to that fish. I thought for sure I had her, but that was definitely not the case. She popped off as soon as she got close.
Wow, that's nuts.
Unreal. Do you jig at all for muskies, or is that just kind of a freak time that happened when you're like walleye fishing?
In all honesty, I've never jigged. I shouldn't say that. I guess last year I did some jigging, didn't catch anything, but that was just one of those. It's like, oh my God, I just grabbed the first rod I seen and it had a tube on it. But I've never actually went out and jigged. That's something in some areas that we fish that we definitely want to try, especially in the fall when those fish start to, gather up and we're finding like some of those bigger Cisco's on some of the stuff that we fish. Because when the Cisco spawn is on, it can be, I've also seen it when the Cisco spawn is there's so many fish in one area. It was a full moon and you just look in the glare and these fish are just porpoising. This is like the end of October on a normal year for us. And you just look at the graph, it's like 0 feet to almost 18 feet, as thick as you possibly think. And we're trying
Yeah.
to, we were trying everything, but I was like, there is such thing as too much bait.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely seen that before where I mean, you were just mentioning that like maybe it's a good thing that all those guys are they're the meat takers in the
Yeah.
winter taking all those perch in your area. That
They've
could
been
be a
pent
good thing,
up too for
honestly.
a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
they
ready to
were
go this year.
raring to go.
Oh, it was busy out there this year. Very busy. A couple guys that worked for me, they kept going out like every weekend because I got them into fishing over the last couple of years. They never even touched a fishing rod until they would always hear stories and they'd always chirp me. How was the weekend? Oh, we caught a couple. We seen a bunch. Oh, you seen a bunch. I was like, wait till you guys try. Wait till you guys come out with me muskie fishing, and then you'll see why there's so much excitement when you see a muskie and the
Right.
adrenaline rush, especially when you're not used to it.
Mm,
Because I don't know how many times, Gus, I'm sure with all the clients you have, and especially people that aren't experienced, you can only tell so many stories and they're probably just shake their head. But until they physically see this happen, and then they're like, oh my God, they actually come right to the boat. And like,
yep.
it's just, I had that actually happen last fall. Um, I've actually heard you guys talk about this before in your podcast. I think it was when the water's like just before turnover is like my favorite time to throw top water. Um, I don't think you guys were talking about top water, but I remember you talking about certain temperatures, and I was like thinking to myself, this is like my favorite time. A lot of lakes we fish, like when it gets to that like 53 to 55, it just seems like we got on this top water bite. This is now like 4 years ago where nothing else was working. And I jumped on the bow of the boat because we're trying all our normal stuff. And it's like, let's see if they're like stupid shallow. And I end up seeing a fish with its tail almost sticking out of the water facing us. And then we end up having a 6 fish day all on top water, just going to the shallowest bays we could find, pikey, lily pads, bury yourself in these lily pads, and just basically sometimes we were hitting shore and dragging the lures offshore and getting fish to come out of like underneath a lily pad. And it's like, this is wild. Mind you, we're not catching giant fish, but when you're up there for a 4-day trip and you didn't see anything for the first 2 days, and then you put 6 fish in the boat, and I think our biggest fish was like a 43. But again, the guy that was with me has never caught a fish on top water. But going into last season, my uncle was with me. He had his son with him, and he's one of those guys that we tell like it's cool to see a figure eight and blah blah blah. And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. He's just shaking his head. And we were fishing. It was one of those things we didn't see a fish all the first day. So I was like, I'm gonna try super shallow. The sun came up, and I threw on a prop bait that I made, and it was probably the 5th cast. I had just reeling it in, and I see this wake coming in. It was probably 25 feet behind the bait, and it was just absolutely missiling towards the top water like it was like the middle of summer. And I was like, holy shit, here she comes. And by the time I got to the boat, I just started my first turn. And when I like kind of slowed it down in the corner, she actually torpedoed out of the water and missed it. So I like kept the bait there, and where she jumped went right in front of my cousin who's at the front of the boat. And he's like, what the and also, so I like stopped the bait, and I seen the fish completely turn, and you just knew it was going to eat, right? She flared out her gills, and she like paused for a second. And I just even said, I'm like, she's going to eat. And I just ripped it forward as fast as I could and just absolutely smoked the bait. My uncle's standing in the net. This is the uncle that always seems to mess a few things up. And they are just going absolutely bonkers. And I was like, get the net, get the net. And he's like, oh my God, did you see that, Bob? My cousin's freaking out because he's never seen a fish in the figure eight or a muskie up that close. I was like, get out of the net. And he's like fumbling over the net. It was like a 42-incher. We ended up losing it just before he got the net in the water. But that's all they talked about for the rest of the day. Like, that was insane. I was like, he's like, man, I thought this was the best time of year to come fish. I'm like, this usually doesn't happen this time of year. But I'm like, if you want to try this, we'll come like midsummer when they're burning on bucktails. But that was just a cool story that having a person that's never actually seen something like that happen. And then I was like, oh my God, I wish I had a GoPro for this, because this was just one of the hottest fish I've ever had. Even like some of the summer fish don't move as quick as this fish covered that distance. And to have it on top water right at the feet was something to be seen.
Unreal. And that was, like you said, that 50-some degree time frame that
It
this
was,
happened?
this is around like 54 to 55 is when we get on this top water bite. And this is in Northern Ontario. It's like one of those things. We're going to go, even though I know the water temperature's like that. I generally think the bigger ones are still, on the rocks and stuff like that, maybe on like the first edge, but we just weren't seeing things again. So it's like, all right, let's just go super shallow. And I was like, worst case, especially with guys that aren't as experienced, it's like, we'll stumble into some pike. So at least they're getting some type of fish, right? And sure enough, the first fish that did that, and but yeah, it seems to be that 54 to 55 degree water is by far my favorite time to throw top water.
That's legit. I think we're kind of seeing that a little bit here in Wisconsin. Our fish maybe don't fully act like that, but do you use just the prop style, or have you tried some slower ones? Because I've tried the slower ones in that ballpark of temperature that you're talking about, maybe not quite that cold, and it's worked, like a flap tail.
Flaptail, but honestly, my favorite bait is I actually make myself a walk the dog top water, and it is like my favorite throwback bait pretty much any time of the year. Even on opener last year, I don't know how many fish come follow, at least look at it. It was a really good locating bait for us last opener. And we even fished some open water basins that were 60 feet deep. And I ended up having a fish come in over 60 feet of water on Walk the Dog. I was probably
Wow.
pushing that like 50 to 52-inch range and just an absolute blimp.
Oh,
And
good Lord.
and the funny thing is, it was like the end of my like just as it hit the water, I twitched it like 3 times, and we're like, "Is that a fish, or is that just the weight from the splash?" And then it's like, keep working, and the guy in the front of the boat's like, "Oh yeah, that's a fish." And then as soon as I got it towards the boat and I started figure eight, I was like, "Oh my god, that's a big fish." And it did one turn, and then we just watched it go straight back to where she came from. We ended up moving 2 fish doing that in open water.
Unreal. That's one thing we haven't really played around with too much is the walk the dog. I started to later last year and moved a couple fish in September, but I gotta add that to the arsenal, especially opener. That's kind of interesting. You don't hear a lot about that topwater much at opener. Every once in a while, I'll hear maybe like a little bastard or a very small prop bait, but I
We
think
do have to
walk the
do it more,
dog
man. I mean, I threw Walk the Dog
or like a
once
globe
last
or
year.
something.
I threw
Yeah.
Walk the Dog once last year and got crushed. But well, in
When
my
was that?
defense, right before the PMTT championship, when we were pre-fishing, not on the lake that we were doing the tournament on.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Sorry. Yeah, we got crushed.
Um,
That's right. We lost like 4 in
yeah,
20 minutes. That's right.
yeah, it was really fun.
I
But
remember now.
in my defense, Topwater was I was having a very big time hate relationship with Topwater last year, so it was not something I was gravitating towards every time I'd look in the box. And
Yeah.
maybe I
Well,
just
I
need to throw more Walk the Dog. I don't know.
I don't know what it is, but like I would say the last 3 years, whenever I would move a fish, especially when it comes to that later season, like after September,
Hmm.
I would put on the walk the dog lure and I could get them to commit to that. Mind you, I wouldn't go right
Interesting.
back on the fish. I'd like finish the spot and I would come back.
Yeah.
And like even one fish is like I was throwing a manta, like a typical glide bait, right? Like wide glides, and I had a fish come out. And generally I throw a manta when I'm fishing new water because I feel like Rich calls them the hypnotizer, right? To me, it's like one of the best
Mm,
locating baits that there is.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I'll go back and I throw in the walk the dog top water, which is obviously a bit tighter, makes a bit more noise. And sure enough, I got it, and it was a 44. So then I was like,
Which one?
okay.
Which brand of
So
Walk the Dog? Which Walk the Dogs do you like? Did you say? I can't remember. Sorry.
I actually make my own,
Make
and
your own. Okay.
I make my
That's
own. It's kind of got like a popper face to it, so
huh.
it sprays a ton of water. Glenn has one. I think he's done a video on it before. I don't. I've only ever made like five, so there might be four in public, and I've had mine for 4 years now, and it's like it's beat. It's it's just something about that bait. I don't know what it is. It's super loud, but it's not like a wide glide or anything. But every time you pull it, it like pushes down and just pops water out, and then it hangs tail heavy when it just sits there.
Oh
So
wow, that's
it's just
sweet.
a unique style walk the dog top water, and it's I probably don't make more of them because it takes a little bit of finesse to make it to walk good. But I'm just used to using it now that it's one of those baits I wouldn't want to sell to someone and then they're gonna message you like, man, this thing doesn't run.
Yeah.
But it's like
yeah.
I don't want to have a bait that has an owner manual to tell you how to fish it. So I want to have a bait that anyone could just grab and throw and work it their own way and it's gonna work as a bait
That makes
maker at
sense.
least.
Sure.
Right. That is like the category. I mean, I guess you could put walk the dog and glide, where you hear the most horror stories of bait makers, of people just being like, this bait doesn't
Mhm.
work, you know. And I could totally see that, the weighting of it, or somebody using an extra heavy rod when they should be using a medium heavy or something like that, and they're not realizing it. So I could totally see that.
Like to me, if you like, I've made a few glide baits, and I do like mantas are my favorite glide bait. So I've made my own style of mantas that I've never actually sold. I just use them for myself, and I actually make some that are slow rise. And we've caught some fish just like dead sticking it in the middle. Right, it'll get down like 3 feet, and I mean when I mean slow rise, I mean like it might rise a foot every 13 seconds, 14 seconds. Like it just sits right there, and it's just this dead. And most of the time, those fish will be under it the whole time, and you can see it. And all of a sudden, when it just bubbles up and like does that first drop, is when the fish just comes unglued. And it's been
Sweet.
pretty cool to see that happen. And I've caught a ton of big pike on Lake of the Woods with those type of glides too.
That's freaking awesome. One thing I do want to get into, and I remember hearing this, I think you were chiming in on one of the later Hunks podcast. You were like a like a guest on or
Yeah.
one of the hosts or something like that when there was another guest, and you were talking about running these really long nights and doing some weird hours fishing. Like you weren't just a wake up in the morning, go fishing, go home at sunset type of guy. And one thing I always, want to get, information from night fishermen is, what's kind of like a go-to tactic for you? I know it's always slow down this, big blade, slow is common, top water, but do you got like a favorite way you like to night fish and get fish out there? Because it seems like you really can get them on any lure. It's just the preference of the fisherman.
Yeah, so the story that you're talking about was last year. I went out in late November and I got to the launch at midnight and I didn't get back to the launch the following evening at like 6:30, 7 o'clock. And I was out by myself and when I
Jeez,
got
oh man.
yeah, when I got to the dock, the owner, like the marina was closed at 4 o'clock or something, 5 o'clock. And when I got to the dock, the owner was still there and he came running out and just cursed me out. And I was like, what is going on? He's like, dude, I was about ready to call the cops and send a search and rescue party. He's like, I seen you on the webcam come here at midnight. He's like, you've been fishing for like 17, 18 hours, man. He's like, what are you doing? You're by yourself and blah, blah, blah. I was like, man, I'm like, have you ever seen my truck here? I'm fine. I go out here at random times. I'm like, my loved ones know where I am. And don't worry, I have all the gear I need. I'm very safe. Like I know where I'm going on the water. I fished this water my whole life. And so yeah, he was kind of upset. So he's like, next time you come out here, you write a note, you put it in the like the pay box so we know. But
Oh,
so I did that, but I got zero fish. I seen one fish in that whole time. But it was
It's
one of
tough,
those
man.
that I forget how many miles I put on, but if you were to see my graph to see how far I went, like it was rather impressive how much water I covered. And I seen one fish on active and that was it. Um I
Late fall
almost
trolling or casting?
it was all trolling because this is on the Great Lakes and when I first got out there the first hour I almost snagged a perch net. Luckily it was full moon and I just seen this glimmer of something. And on the Great Lakes, right, they run a buoy and then there's a top line and the nets drop down to the bottom. And I just seen it the last second, so I had to hammer the boat in reverse, pull up my line, and I ended up snagging
Oh my
it. But I
God.
I did get the lure back, but there was some cursing. There was no one on the boat, so I could,
You could
curse as
curse
loud
as
as I
loud as
want.
you. Yeah.
There
You
was
keep
you're
it
not a soul
truly,
on water.
yeah, you're truly going for the one doing something like that. I mean,
I
that's some dedication.
all the power to you.
I
Yeah.
mean, I I do try to do a lot of night fishing just because I do have young kids and lakes being as close as they are to me. I can get out there and I can run on next to no sleep for a long time. Like going up to the Wisconsin show, I woke up at 6 o'clock Thursday morning. I had bait still on the rack that I had to clean. I drove the whole 13 hours there. We got there at like 6:30 in the morning and I ended up staying up till 11:30 that night. And I finally went to bed. And then it was pretty much the same thing the following night to come home. You're up Sunday morning. Didn't get home till 11 o'clock the following day. But I just, even like I got a trip planned with a bunch of buddies and I have a boat now, a bigger boat, I should say. And they're like, we're never going to see you. I was like, no, you won't see me. Because I'll probably be in the boat by myself, or there's going to be guys that are going to be substituting fishing with me. Because there's some guys that like the night fish, some guys that don't like the night fish. There's guys that like to get up early, which I'm an early riser anyways. So I'll probably be on the water from like 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning till probably 3 o'clock at night, go back, refuel, take a couple hour nap, and then I'll probably do it all again. I'll probably do that for 5 days straight.
So somebody who's fished on all these crazy ass hours, I mean, what from your experience, what have you found is like your best window if you could even boil
It's
that
really,
down?
yeah, It's really funny. It's either 9 in the morning till 11, and then basically the hour before sunset and the hour after sunset.
Really?
Wow.
But in my mind, you always like, the guys in Green Bay are like, you see all these giants that are caught 3 o'clock in the morning. I think you guys had them on. Like, is it Spieth that caught those like 54s at 3 o'clock seemed to be the witching hour?
Yeah,
Like,
Alex McLean and his
okay,
Tyler
Oh yeah,
Schlabs, those guys,
that's it. Yeah.
those northern
yeah,
Minnesota guys are
Minnesota.
they're just built different like that. Like they're running on that clock for those big fish hours. And I'm always curious, like it's interesting to talk to somebody like you who's fishing a whole different, region. And you're like, obviously I'm sure you've caught a bunch of fish at night, but you're like, yeah, some of my best hours are during the day. And I'm just curious, yeah, it's interesting.
In all honesty, we haven't even caught that many at night. And when it is, it's basically, like I said, it could be 10 o'clock at night, 11, the latest. But then again, a lot of times if I'm with my uncle, like he's passing out in the boat. It's his boat that we generally go out in just because he has a bigger boat with a full windshield. And I always tell anyone I fish with, like, you have to tell me when you're ready to leave because I will stay out here as long as I want to.
Hmm.
And I'm one of those guys that if I go on a 4 day trip, like I go up north and I'm just strictly there to fish. Like I just
Mhm.
want to get as many hours as I can in a fishing trip. And like I said, I'm good without much sleep. And I could still stay focused. And like as long as I have food and water in the boat and there's enough gas to keep me going, I will honestly keep going. And I have fished with guys that told me they're like, oh yeah, I could fish for hours. And then it's like the one time we fished from 6 in the morning till I think it was like 2 o'clock that night. And this guy is just like, "Are you ready yet?" I was like, "I thought you were gonna keep going, buddy." And he's just like, "I'm done, dude."
It's only getting started.
Man, there's another minor at like 4:30 in the morning. Like, I don't want to
Oh,
miss it.
you're
And he's just like,
crazy.
"Oh," it's just. I was like, "That's fine. It's your boat. I told you, you're the captain. You tell me when you want to stop because I know we're coming
We
out again tomorrow."
we need you to come down to one of our muskie bender weekends and whip us into shape because we are
All
the
of us.
worst. We're all talk. Like every single time in the text chains and during the winter when we're on podcasts, like, oh yeah, we're gonna just fish through the night all day, whatever. And then when a push comes to shove, like that sun starts setting, we're like, hey, you guys want to go grab a pizza and some beers and go to
It
bed?
sounded pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, let's go to eat.
I mean, I get it. I get that because it's like the camaraderie and you guys are all together. It's a boys' weekend out. You want to like spend time, whatever. But again, it's just hard for me because having a wife, two young kids, I'm always busy in the summer with work. So it's like when I get the go ahead to go fishing, I'm
Yeah, you're
taking
going.
full advantage of it because I can recoup fine and I'll be fine to go to work on Monday. There's times I don't come home till Monday morning at like 3 in the morning, and then I'll get up at 5 and I'll head out the door at 6. Like I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's for us, like, because obviously Gus is on the water so much, but like for Brian and I, it's tough. Like the way the weekends are set up, obviously we all have long car rides back to where we live, when we go up and fish with Gus. So it's like in our brains, Sundays are kind of tough because it's like, well, we can't stay all day Sunday, so we got to hit
Mhm.
the road at a certain time. Well, if we want to fish on Sunday, we got to be up early. So it's like that Saturday, night, we're like, well, we can't stay out till 2 in the morning and then be back out on the water at 4 or 5 a.m. So that's where we get into some trouble. But I think if we just committed to the full Friday, Saturday thing and just said Sunday is a travel day, we'd be better off.
You just need to load up on nicotine pouches and you'll be fine.
No problem
Right.
there.
Yeah.
They got that covered.
Yeah. But for the most part, Gus, to answer your question, going back to the trolling, like a lot of times it's like jointed, noisy baits seem to work best for us at night.
Yeah.
And we keep them like high up in the water column. We do tend to slow down. I'll do like 3 to 3.5 in the summer rather than doing like 4, 4.5. But again, with the water clarity where we fish, like if you like at night when we fish some of these areas, you can see a white pounder coming in from 15, 20 feet away still. Like they just
Right.
glow in the water at night. And that's where
Yeah.
I think I sent you that one dipstick color, right? The upside down ball liquor.
Yeah, that one's sick.
And that is just like, to me, is just like the ultimate color. And you know what? I sold all of them at Wausau, and that's probably one of my favorite colors now. So you can see it, and like to me, black belly, right? A fish can see that in pretty much any color of water.
Mm-hmm. For
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. One thing, I mean, I don't know if you have this answer or maybe just like a suggestion. So I did get a little bit into night trolling kind of last year, and I got some bites, but I lost everything. And all of the bites were on short line jointed baits off of boards. And I was going slow, like just sub 3 miles an hour. And they weren't sticking. And I had, laser sharp hooks. I didn't think that was the problem. And I tried to tighten down the drag. Would you give it some juice if you hear the rod go off? Or like, do you change your drag up or what's the deal there? Or am I just getting unlucky?
I mean, I'm sure luck does have something to play with it, but believe it or not, I've had better luck hooking fish on especially boards with a looser drag. And I used to run walleye rods for boards for the longest time, just like a heavy walleye rod that just would just enough backbone that you could still pull fish in, but just having so much of that tip that would just absorb it, and then I just dial my drag down just a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll never touch the throttle. And I yell at my uncle all the time when that board rod dumps. We're not touching the throttle until that board is off because we've lost so many fish. Where if he's driving and also the board
Yeah.
rod, the first thing he does is put it in neutral, right? And like once that board goes under, those fish have so much leverage and they could just swim forward, and you just can't reel a board in quick enough with all that tension to even come close to keeping up with a fish screaming towards you. So
Right.
that's what I used to do with board rods, but now like I changed all over. But I use like the 9 foot 2020 trolling rod for my board rods, and we've had pretty good luck. Generally on my boards too, I run a lot of smaller baits. Like we're talking
Okay.
shad raps, these nomads, like that. That would probably be the biggest. Sometimes I have like a couple Jake style minnow baits that I'll run on it. You know, something that's gonna have a good hooking percentage, a thin bait with three hooks on it. Um, I
Yeah.
generally like any bait that wanders. I don't really like putting them on the boards. I'll put those on like a down rod or something like that. Because for some reason I've lost a bunch of fish with any bait that has a wander to it on a board. Like these nomads, like the jointed ones, they wander quite a bit, and we've lost a couple fish on the boards. But when I put them on a down rod, they seem to be fine.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm trying to gather here, because I'm just trying to learn this for myself and whoever's listening. So you're saying board rod goes off, keep it a little bit looser at night, or kind of just in general. Are you saying pretty much like the board is almost kind of setting the hook because it has so much force as well
Bait,
there, or and keep the boat moving forward when it goes off. Don't throw it in neutral or nothing right away.
yeah, that's the first thing. I keep the boat running forward. The only time that boat goes into neutral is when we have the board in the boat. But I do tend to loosen off my board rods. And like I said, I used to use walleye rods, and we never lost fish on those walleye rods. I don't know if it's just because there was so much more flex in the first 4 feet of those rods that would just absorb the. But you would like we've watched the board rods go off. You just see them just right. They just
Yeah.
completely buckle over, and all of a sudden you'd hear the
Mm-hmm.
drag going. And then
Mm-hmm.
what? There's a couple of times we like watch the rod, and then you'd like look back and you see the board slowly going back, and we'd have enough time to grab it, and then you'd feel it. And then obviously another bonus with when I run the baits so tight together and my board's not that far out is if I just stand on the back of the boat, and by the time I lift the rod up, there isn't much room for that fish to drive the board down unless it's going straight down. So there's not enough line out where I can still keep that rod up high enough and I can keep that board out of the water. Because the amount of times if it sinks a board, which obviously happens often,
Mm-hmm.
that they have a much greater chance to pop off. That's why I always keep the boat
Okay.
running until that board is
Yeah.
in the boat.
Okay.
That's how
Well,
I do it.
that's
I don't know if that's the right way of doing it, but it's worked for me,
it's
so I'm going to continue to do it.
it
Yeah.
sounds right to me because I mean even prior to running board rods, some fish that I've lost in the past is just being, stupid and putting the boat into neutral way too early, even on just two down rods. And on a windy day, your boat can just get tossed one direction, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you lose all tension on the side that you're trying to battle the
Yeah.
fish. And, that's the one thing yeah,
So like
it's just a tough game of playing with, speed and drag,
it
basically.
really is. And like obviously sharp hooks. I know you probably sharpen your hooks. Like one fish, I'm sharpening them again. If you
Yep.
even like see it's like running ground or something, like you pull it in, you just make sure the hooks are good. And also like where we fish, right? Like I would say 90% of these fish are shooting straight off the bottom coming up for that lure. So they're generally T-boning that lure when you get those fish in. And so usually they're getting both hooks. But I would say, especially with the smaller baits, I think most people would think that these fish would choke it, but most of the time it's like right in the front of their mouth and there's a hook on one side of the cheek, right on the other side of the face, and it works out. As long as there's tension with that boat moving forward. Like I used to
Yeah.
troll by myself a lot and I had a tiller. It was just an old crappy tiller. And like if you let go of the handle, the thing would just flop around. So I would always
Yep.
troll with like my Tarova down in front and I'd have my, the handheld in my hand. And as soon as the rod dump, it's like north setting on like full blast. And then
Yep.
I would grab the rod, right? And if I had to take off the board myself, I would just slow the trolling motor down, just even to like two, so I can net the fish. And then I just put it on spot lock. And then I could do my thing when I was by myself.
Yeah, that's
Game
actually
plan.
a really good tip, and I think I got that myself from Doug Wagner talked about that. I don't remember where when he said put the trolling motor down and then that's what and some people do that too where that's how they turn the boat. I still
Yeah.
like if I'm trolling, I have the trolling motor on it's in the water but it's off and I'm
Yep.
full on using, my tiller arm to troll, but as soon as the rod goes off, I'm, like you said, north setting, put it on like I think I usually do like 5 or 6 or it depends on
Yep.
the wind and the waves and whatnot. And then as I do that, I reach back and get my tiller running dead straight and then lock it or whatever you have as a tiller, or if you
Yeah.
have a normal console boat, it's not a problem. But that was the thing. I think that one time I put it in neutral, the motor turned as well, like right
Yeah.
away, and I was like, lost all tension and
Yeah. I,
lost the
that's,
fish.
that's basically how I learned to do that. It was like the first time I did that, I just jumped up. It was just an older tiller and it just turned automatically and it went to the wrong way. So
Hmm.
it just
Hmm.
slack line. And
Yep.
by the time I reeled in, it was like she was gone right away. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to try this, and it seems to work. But we do a lot of like we'll go out spring salmon fishing and fall salmon fishing on Lake Ontario, and that's how we generally steer the boat. You just put the boat at whatever 2 miles an hour. You have the trolling motor down, and you're just steering with your trolling motor. Because a lot of times there's so many boats out there, it gets a little chaotic, and some guys are running 200-foot spreads, and then you get yelled
Jeez.
at because you're going to run over their board even though they're coming towards you. It's just it can
Jeez.
get a little hectic out there, but
Good thing we don't have to deal with that up here.
yeah,
Uh, I
and it
mean, it can
does.
get busy and whatnot on the lakes, but still trolling, you know, at least people are mindful of a board. But I also don't troll middle of the day on a super busy lake
Yeah,
with boards.
it's
So,
it gets pretty wild out there, man. Especially when you hook into a big salmon, those things can take like 500 yards of line when you hook into them. We had a fish once on the far rod dumps, and it just went straight across, and all of a sudden, next rod dumps, next rod dumps, next rod dumps, and it's
oh,
like, and then you look around, there's literally 100 boats in this area, right? And now the guy he's steering and it's like kind of panicking at this point because it's like you're trying to steer. This fish is going sideways. It just keeps screaming. You're reeling in the other ones because we're just usually running like lead core and some planer boards and stuff like that. And it just get it in the net, and it's just the biggest freaking line ball you've ever seen. And you just
oh,
start cutting, and you lose 100 yards of lead core. It is just an absolute disaster. And at the end of the day, it was like an 8 pound coho that decided to go from one side of the boat right across to the other. But
oh,
it can get
freaking
a little
horse.
chaotic out there.
Hey, maybe it's a good thing that muskies don't, quote unquote, fight that hard. I don't know if I want to
Yeah,
deal with that.
I'll
Mm-mm.
tell you. Have you guys ever done salmon fishing before?
Yeah, I've been out on, I think, Lake Michigan twice for the salmon trolling on the big boats, and that's a crazy ordeal.
It's
It's been a while though.
So we actually go out to my buddy's bass boat. You obviously got to pick and choose your day. But we ended up
Okay,
catching one.
wow.
Yeah. We're out on Lake Ontario. We end up hooking in. It was like just over 25 pounds, this big shit, like this big king. And he ended up taking a video. It was out 200 feet to begin with. And by the time it stopped running, it was close to 800 feet. And that was its first run. And it's just like, my God. And then you'd bring in 300 feet, then it takes out another 100 feet. You bring in 200 more feet, takes out another 100
Mm-hmm.
feet. And it's just like your arm is absolute toast. And then they got these big leaders with all these flashers. You got to walk all the way to the front of his 22-foot boat just so he can net the fish. But it's
Yeah,
it's wild. They fight real hard.
That's
it is
cool.
nuts. I do remember the first time I went was like fourth or fifth grade. Me, my dad, and uncle, and my friend and his dad, and we got up super early, whatever, and got a couple keepers, like the eaters, the normal size, like right away in the morning at like 4:30 a.m. And then we were getting some of the big kings to hit, and there's a picture of me just like fully on my ass, just like sitting on the bottom of the boat with my legs up, pressed up against the back of the stern of the boat, like just
Oh yeah.
trying to bring this thing in. And I remember it was a couple 100 feet out there, and I might be exaggerating just for the story, maybe, but I want to say it maybe hit like 1,000 feet. And
I
I
would
think
not be surprised.
by the time I got back in, I think like another couple hundred, it popped off, and I was pretty sad. And I know that day one of our friends got a giant king. I don't know. It was, like I said, it was in fourth or fifth grade or something like that, but it was a giant king. So I assume it was
Yeah,
also probably a giant king.
yeah, they just go. And I also snagged a sturgeon once when I was musky fishing, and
Nightmare.
it was just the rods dumping, and we're on Lake St. Clair, and my uncle's like, "Is that a snag?" I was like, "There's no snags out here, man. Pull the lines," and it just kept
There's
screaming
no
and screaming. And then I like looked down, it's in the backing. I was like, "Oh my God, you got to turn the boat around." It was probably a 25-minute ordeal to get this fish. I had it snagged right in the top of the head. It was probably like, just over 5 feet. But I finally got it into the net, and I like my arms were completely done. This is
I
like 10
bet.
minutes in, too. 10 minutes in of a new bait I just made. I was like, let's try it out. And these baits are 3 feet under 4 feet under the surface. I don't know why we snagged a sturgeon, but
Jesus.
that was quite the fight.
That's epic.
Unreal. I think we're getting about that time where we might want to wrap it up. I don't know if you got any extra questions, Max, at all.
Man, I think I'm good right now. This has been a lot of fun. I mean, obviously I'm always down to talk Muskies, but talking some junior hockey there was a good time. Well, what,
I
what was
could
his
Good to hear
name?
those stories.
Bear Claw?
Bear paw, bear
Bear
claw.
Paw?
bear claw.
Bear Claw.
The funny thing is that was his actual last name. It was just spelt different than you would pronounce it. He was a big old
Interesting.
native. He was a big old native boy. And he had like a knife scar across the side of his face.
This
And
guy's straight out of a movie, man.
dude, it
It's
I was
was.
gonna say.
Let's put
you
it
I'm
this
sh
way.
Oh, go
Let's put
ahead.
it. So my old man, it was big in the hockey. Like he coached like major, junior, and stuff like that. He coached his whole life, and he coached the senior team when I was only like 12 years old. It was a hometown team, and I watched guys that I thought were like absolute nail guns get piss pumped by this guy. I guess I was probably more like 15 because I was just starting to get into like I played my first junior game, and then I'm playing senior, and my first game is against this guy. And one of the guys I looked up to on the senior team, because he was the captain of the London Knights and played all this pro hockey. One of the toughest guys in the league besides his Bear Claw guy. And I seen this guy get his ass kicked by Bear Claw. And the first game he comes up to me, he's like, "Oh, I see Bear Claw's in the lineup." He's like, "Hey, if he grabs you, just start swinging, buddy. Don't even say a word." And I'm like 21
Oh my
years old
God.
21 years old looking at the guy that I know would beat the wheels off of me, and he wants me to go out there. I was like, okay, thanks for the advice. He's like, oh, you'll be all right. And then he just walks away. And then, like, this guy was like, it was just like off the movie Goon. Like, you'd go in warm ups. He's standing on the red line, just staring at every one of us. Just
Oh my God.
the guy is like Zdeno Chara size on skates, right? He was 6'8". That's what his bio said, 6'8", like 265.
That's a
And
big human.
He's just staring at every one of us. And he honestly, he'd go in the corner. There's once he dumped the puck in the corner. And I like look behind me and here he comes. You just hear the train tracks, right? He's just trucking. I just get up to the boards. He smokes me. He just looks at me. He's like, "You want to go?" I was like, "Not really." He's like, "All right." He skated away. I was like,
At least he's polite about it.
man, I was like, I do not. This is my first game. I just got out of playing like junior at the time. And like there was no guys like that. Like I played with a guy in junior who was our fighter and he was 6'6". He was 260 and that guy had 400 penalty minutes. So he was the fighter on our team. And I kind of like never had to do that when I played with him. And then
Right.
going into senior and you see these men out here, right? You're still 21 years old. I think I'm a young teenager. And it's just like, I'm going to get killed out here. And our coach was even yelling at us after the first period. He's like, "Is anyone going to fight this Bear Claw guy? Who's the tough guy on this team? What the hell's going on? You're all acting like a bunch of pussies and blah, blah, blah." It's like,
Oh my
it's like
God.
the one guy on our team who was a pretty good fighter, he pipes up. He's like, "Why don't you get the fucking skates on?"
Yeah, seriously. Just
He's
gonna
like, "You think,
say.
yeah, you think I'm
Right.
afraid of that guy? Blah, blah, blah." It's like, we'll see you next time. Come out and go against him if you
I
really
was
want
gonna
to.
say, strap him on, coach. Let's
Oh
go.
yeah, it
That's
was fun.
crazy, man. Good stuff. Good
Good
stuff.
old
Yeah.
Canadian, good old Canadian hockey.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Goon. I was
Love that.
literally gonna bring that up. I'm like, this sounds like a guy out of the movie Goon or something like that. It's
Dude,
just
like
good stuff.
Do I dare find a Goon quote for the podcast this week?
I think
Is
Yeah.
that's
there
a good
one
one.
that's doable?
I think so.
Or
I
are they
think
all
there's a
pretty
couple good
raunchy?
ones.
Yeah, you'll be able to find one. But no,
I
man,
think I think
I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your time. This has been a lot of fun.
yeah,
No,
this
it
is
was great.
awesome.
It was great.
I
Thanks
got
for having me, guys.
I do got one thing that I totally spaced on when we got into your baits. How did TopLine, the name, come from?
Well, actually, my contracting company is called TopLine Contracting because my partner and I, when we started it, he also played hockey. We were playing like 7 days a week in beer leagues right after all this senior and junior. So that's like, this is obviously pre wife, pre kids. We lived
Right.
together and we joined every beer league team we possibly could. We'd like just to stay in shape. And we just, we're living the dream. We just still think we're that good at hockey. And then it's like, oh, what a cool name this would be, Top Line. And then came up with the logo. And like the logo for the Top Line Baits is kind of a spin off of my contracting logo. And that's how
That's
that all
sweet.
came about.
That's sweet. I should have put two and two together when it said line and we're talking about hockey.
Yeah.
Freaking A,
even though
but
he
that's freaking
even though
sweet.
he wasn't that good of a hockey player. Uh,
He wasn't the top line.
He definitely wasn't, but I gave it to him. He's really
He
good
was
at
the
what he does now.
dipstick.
So yeah, he was the dipstick. I always say he's the smartest dumb person you'll ever meet. He's one of
Right
those.
on.
Yeah.
Oh
We
yeah.
know him. No guys like that.
Again, also not on the pod tonight. Oh my God. So yeah, before we sign off here, Adam, how do people get in touch with you and how do they get your baits? I know you got a Facebook page where you find most of it.
Yeah, so usually now with the way work and kids are, because my kids are getting to like my daughter's 7, so she's in every sport there is. My son's starting to get in every sport. I generally only sell them at shows now, but I'm trying to do more shows every year. Like last year, I did 3 shows. I might add another show next year. Um, we'll see how that goes. But then every once in a while, if people want to join my top line blacklist page, every once in a while I get some free time and I'll throw up, 10, 15 baits in the summer, do raffles, draws, or just, comment to buy. But for the most part, I just try to keep it to show season now. Like I go to New York, I do the one in Canada. I'm going back to Wisconsin. Wisconsin's such a wild show. I'm definitely never going to miss
Awesome.
that one. Um, that was I know a couple guys told me they think you're going to do good. And I was like, whatever. I've never sold out. I always bring way more baits than I have to. I just rather have more colors and whatnot for people. And it was Justin Regan that actually told me, he's like, dude, you should probably hide some baits for Saturday. I was like, you think so? He's like, yeah, you're going to want to hide baits. And that first hour and a half on Friday, they cleared out all the dipsticks that I had on the table. And
Oh my God.
it was pretty wild. my wife, like I always bring my wife to the shows because she keeps me in line and she's very organized. She gives the hooks out with she does the math and everything, which I'm usually good at math, but I was so flustered on running on next to no sleep. I couldn't even do basic math in my head. When I just look back, there was a lineup. Actually, Duke Dozer, he was at the end of that aisle and he took a picture for me that first like 10 minutes when it opened because there was a lineup going right through all the way to the corner. And I was pretty shocked by it. So I told Rich I'm 100% coming back next year and I'm going to bring as many baits as I possibly can. And it's probably going to be all the dipsticks and a few twitch baits. But if you can look me up on Instagram, it's TopLine Baits, Facebook TopLine Baits. I haven't been posting much lately. I kind of got to that point, the whole social media thing was getting a little too negative for me. So I try to stray away from it. I post pictures every once in a while, but I'm sure I'll do more this summer
You
as I keep
get,
making some.
not to keep you for too long here, but I totally relate to that social media stuff. I mean, do you get people chirping you or like talking negative about you on that stuff, or is it predominantly pretty positive for the bait side of things?
I mean, for the most part, I would say, yeah, it's very positive. And a lot of
Good.
guys, like after show season, my messenger was just blowing up. Do you have any baits left? Do you have any baits left? And it's like, unfortunately, I don't. And then I just tell them, like, I'll be at this show next year. I might do this show. Like, this is where you can get them. But, you always get people. Like, when I first started, like, I did a list, and that just got crazy. I think I fished that first year, like, maybe 3 times because anytime I had free time, I had to make lures. And you tell someone, oh, give me a month. And then it's like 30 days to the minute. Is the bait done? It's like, man, I haven't even got it done yet. It's like, what and they started getting negative about it. And then I just eventually was
Yeah.
like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm doing this on my own time. It's a hobby. As soon as I stop enjoy doing it, then why do it at all? And if people are going
Right
to get
on.
upset about it, I know some
Yeah.
people like Vavrock has told me there's some people that comment on his videos. It'd be nice to get these baits. You get all these baits. And it's like, Matt's a friend of mine. He obviously helps promote things. And like at the end of the day, like I said, I want to get away from this contracting thing and hopefully in the next few years and we'll see where this bait thing goes. And it would be nice to have more time to build baits. This is like I say this is
Yeah.
my retirement gig. I feel like I'm in it for the long haul. I got some ideas. I'm always working on new baits. But yeah.
Cool.
And I even told Brendan, I was like, don't do a list. And then he went and did a list again. I was
I
like,
was just about to bring that when you said the list thing, and I'm like, yeah, Brendan did that, and he's already been stressed. He was stressing about the list in Minnesota before
Minnesota,
he
yeah.
even got to Wisconsin. I'm like, oh, brother, dude, like this is gonna be a lot of work. I hope you got
it
the time
is.
for it.
It really
It's like
is. And he's
2 months
traveling all
out.
the time. Yeah, he's traveling all the
Yeah,
time. And it's like, dude,
yeah,
I kept telling him all winter. It's like, you need to bust your butt, dude. Like, he would message me. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm like, why aren't you working on baits? Well, I don't know. It's like, dude, I'm like down in my basement till like 2, 3 in the morning. Get up and go to work. Like, you don't even have another job. I was grilling him for a bit there. But he's a good friend of mine. So it's a little banter. And I'm just trying to
so
help
he
him.
could
Like,
take it.
he can take it. And I've told him from day one, I was like, look, I never had anyone I can bounce things off of when I started. So like, if you need help, I'll gladly help you because to have someone to lean on is obviously a positive thing. And it can cut the learning curve down so much. So he's talking to me about painting stuff and like, you know, when he first started doing his glide bait, I was like trying to help him out as much as I could. And just
Yeah.
and like there's like even Ethan from Bigfoot. I started talking
Oh
to him
yeah.
about things and just it's just nice that you can have a community of guys you get to know. And like I feel like some of my best friends now are from this muskie community. That's why I go to New York all the time now. I fish with a buddy named Mike. I met him 3 years ago, and now I see him. I go stateside probably 25 times a year, and I would
Oh
consider him
wow.
one of my better friends. And we bounce stuff off each other. And he's a very good fisherman. He's fished for longer than I have, and I've learned stuff from him. And so it's just if there's someone that can help you do things and cut the learning curve, because we all seen Brendan's baits, right? He obviously has what it takes to make them. His paint jobs have come. I don't know if you've ever seen his first baits, and I had to tell him, you know, you
No.
might want to use some sandpaper next time you put some clear coat on this bait because it's just lumpy and this and that. And I got to fish with Brendan a few years ago. That's when I first met him in person. He's like, "What do you think of this bait?" It's like, "Well, it runs good, Brendan." He's like, "Yeah, it looks like shit." I was like, "Well, this is what you got to do. This is what you got to do." I'm like, "I'm
Gotta
here to
present
help,
them.
buddy. You got to
It's
present them."
cool. It's cool that you said that you kind of built the community and seeing guys like, and they just started building to where they're all at now. I mean, you guys like, I mean, no offense. You guys do it yourselves because you just make such cool shit. So it's like people want them, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a good bad situation. I don't know how to exactly say it, but it's like, the fact that you're getting that much demand is pretty sweet. It's great.
Yeah,
I think it's awesome.
it's been fun, and as long as it stays fun, I'll keep doing it. Like I said, as soon as it gets to where it's like work and I don't want to do it, I'll probably stop doing it. But the way it's been going with the shows and stuff, it's not looking like that anytime soon. And plus, I'm always working on new stuff. I got a cool idea for a new bait
Yeah.
that I want to do this year, and I just keep tinkering. So just try to do something different, try to do something new that's not out there. And I'm hoping to have this
No.
bait out this year, but we'll see.
Right
That's
on there.
awesome. Yeah, we were really pumped to have you in Wausau and can't wait obviously to have you back there again. Did super well. Dive and rises go extremely well for Wisconsinites and people in the Midwest, big
Yeah.
time. So, and yeah, congrats on a great show season and hopefully you get on some good fish this year. So, thank you, Adam, so much for coming on tonight, and we appreciate you taking your time out and chatting Muskies, TopLine Baits, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Anytime. I'm always game to talk. I like talking about fishing and muskies. So it was a pleasure to have me. I've been listening to you guys for a while now.
Hell yeah!
Good stuff.
Thanks for listening, man. Oh yeah, we'll reach out again and get you back on.
Well, just so you know, I'm actually going to be up in Wisconsin the end of August for a week. I'll be fishing.
Oh,
Oh,
So
oh, oh, no.
maybe we can hook up. I'm actually fishing with Jamie DeGroot at some point. I'll be fishing with Taylor Flannery. I'll be fishing with
oh,
Rich,
sweet.
maybe Mike Conklin. So I got some days to fill. So maybe I can talk to you guys and we can get in the boat together. That'd be fun.
Yeah, just let me know.
Be a
Give
blast.
we'll chat after here and talk specific dates, and then
Yeah, absolutely.
see if we can get that dialed up. So appreciate you coming on.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, we can't thank Adam enough for sharing his time tonight. We had a great chat there. Kind of a blend of his baits, the top line baits, got a whole rundown of basically what he has to offer. And, of course, he said he's tinkering all the time. And then we talked pretty in detail about kind of the stuff that he does in the region where he's at in Canada, in that, southern Ontario range, which he's our first guest from that area. So that was pretty exciting to talk about some more Great Lakes muskie, some, northern Ontario, not quite, northwest Ontario, but new stuff. And, I was quite intrigued by some of the trolling tips. Just talking about forage, baits, and all that good stuff. So it was a good mixture. Like Max said in the intro, we got the shows in the rear view, which was kind of just 100% talk about stories and baits. Like that's what we're fully on. The tips might not always have been there, but now we're kind of in that season where we're going to be talking about opener here really shortly and a lot more in-depth tips for you guys and getting more guests on, of course. But uh, thanks again to Adam for coming on. But Max, I guess there's really only one more recap to do, and that's just the Waters Meet show. I know you weren't able to make it, and neither was Brian, but that was a pretty solid show.
Nice. Yeah, it looked awesome. One thing about Adam's interview that I'm bummed I didn't recommend for him is to actually have a bait named after Bear Claw.
Ooh,
Bear Paw. God, I can never
yeah,
remember the name.
Bear Claw, Bear
Bear
Claw.
Claw. Yeah. I mean, God, good stuff. Good stuff from him. Talking about some junior hockey stories and overall super fun conversation. But yeah, it looked like the show went well for you guys. Obviously a little bit of bad weather on that Saturday, but turnout was okay. And Looked like you guys had a good time. Did you stay away from the casino on Saturday?
Sure, sure, yeah. Maybe popped into the casino real quick. All the vendors and the people who went to the show got $20 of free play, and it was my first time at that casino. Another $15 of free play. So we had to poke our heads in, and grab
Yeah,
try
absolutely.
some slots, try it out
There
for
you go.
real quick. But no, that
Sounds
was
like
that
it.
was
Quick
all that was
stuff.
all that was all a great time. And that was the second annual by the ISCCW, the Waters Meet Lake Guards um Association up there in Waters Meet, Michigan. Uh, it was a small show, but it's growing. I did not go last year, but I heard that the numbers basically doubled, and honestly, I was very happy I went. It was a great time. Got to hang out with, all our good friends there, like Taylor and his wife Nikki and Nick with Hammer Customs, as well as the whole Huntsy Tail crew. Kyle came up, of course, with Jamie, and then Clayton was around as well. There was a whole bunch, since it was local, we had a whole bunch of our buddies from kind of the greater Eagle River, Riles and Ida County area that we hang out with throughout the year, whether
Sweet.
they fish a ton or not a whole lot, but it was great to see everybody there. But, you know, despite, being a smaller show and whatnot, Nick sold out. He's 100% sold out. And Kyle did really well, again with the Huntsy tails. So, but there's no surprise there. Those have been hot, hot, hot. So, um, overall good. I enjoyed it. Got to chat with
Cool.
some mainly people that I already kind of seen at Wausau, but met a few um, new people that I haven't chatted with yet. So it was great to meet some new people. It's a good time.
Nice. Nice. I'm glad to hear it. Glad it went well. And yeah, I mean I think that's gonna do it for us here tonight. Gus, if you want to hit them with the socials, I think I am gonna hit the hay. So unfortunately we do not have Brian here this evening to send us away, so you're gonna have to pick up the slack, Gus.
All right, we'll see what I can do there, but it'll be tough without Brian. But if you want to give us a follow on the socials, we got Muskies on Tap on Facebook and Instagram. We're dropping more and more content now that the season is coming in full swing. We got some bait of the weeks that we'll be doing. Uh, this year is going to be mainly just new stuff or stuff we're looking forward to, or maybe some, underground things. A lot of the stuff we already kind of have talked about, but it'll be kind of fun to see, um, where the comments go on Facebook and stuff, and excited for all that stuff. And then of course, my guide service, which is Sugs Fishing, SUGS Fishing. That's on Instagram and Facebook as well. And you can also find the merchandise and website on the website, which is www.sugsfishing.com. You can find all the details about trips. Like I said, the merchandise, photos, all that good stuff. And another way to contact me is through there as well with my, shoot me an email and let's get a trip booked for 2025. A lot of stuff is getting booked. The weekends are filling up extremely fast. I think between end of June, July, and August, there's like 2 Saturdays maybe I have open, and probably 3 or 4 Sundays, and that's about it for weekends there on the busy season. But of course, around that like early June and then bleeding into September, I got more availability. But if you are coming up in the middle of summer and you want to book a trip, now is definitely the time to get on that before it's too late. But all right, well, I am going to leave us off here. Max, do you maybe have a quick before we run off update on our March Madness bracket? Because let's see if there's been any changes. I know last time it was Elon Muskie was in the lead,
Yeah, I
and
think
oh, I just opened up the wrong app. Shoot.
you're good. It
Uh,
it has changed a little bit. So now we have Ivel Hillman's picks
huh?
is in first place. And he
Oh,
has Duke
sure.
winning. And our cousin Tommy Toes in
Yeah.
second place. Hell yeah. Shout out Toes. And then we have an interesting development here. So we have Get the Net and Elon Muskie in third and fourth, but they have Florida winning. So I think it will come down to either if Florida and or Duke wins. There is one person that's sitting in seventh place, Chalkinson 85's picks, who has Auburn winning. So not sure exactly how the scoring system works, but I'm assuming everybody in the probably top 5 to 7, if they have their champion that they pick win, will probably be the
Yeah.
one to end up with the final prize. So um yeah, couple heavyweights there battling at the top. Good to see. So can't thank everybody enough for participating in that again. And good luck to those few people there that are in the top 5.
Good luck there. Yeah, that's Carl Hawkinson. Shout out. Took
Shout
them
out.
out last year, and his son John got a couple muskies. Actually, two of the muskies that he got was on our very own Nick Amrose's hammer jerk. So that was a good day in the fall last year. Yeah, looking forward to see who is the winner of this year's Muskies on Tap 2025 March Madness Bracket Challenge for a hat and a Suggs custom bucktail made made to order, whatever size, color, you name it, whatever you want. So
Mhm.
that'll be good. But yeah, I think that puts a wrap on this week's episode. Appreciate everyone tuning in here. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, whatever, all the stuff. So thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Peace.